Chat GPT, but
Yeah.
we really don't have a program in place yet to fight against AI like we can plagiarism. So
Sure. Yeah.
And it's evolving so fast. It just makes it really
super
hard.
frustrating. Yeah. It used to be essay questions, then I could really see what they know. Now
Mhm.
I feel like I'm going to have to go back to other forms of testing.
Yeah.
Writing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some faculty that are going back to paper tests in the testing center.
Yeah.
Well, I think all of the history, they're doing blue books. You remember blue
Yes.
books from long ago?
Yes, I do.
Yep, that's what they're
I
doing.
do. Yeah.
So,
It's kind of like white lead jeans. Everything comes back.
Yes, it does. This is true. I'm just waiting for the 90s parachute pants to show up again.
Oh, they're coming, I'm sure.
well, I feel like they have, my daughter has several pair.
Does she?
Yeah, that she bought on Shein. They're totally coming back.
How funny. Sorry, just a second. I have to tell my family not to chat in the background. All right, let me give it a few more minutes. Thank you to everyone joining us. We were just sharing the trials and tribulations of ChatGPT and AI.
I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard one professor talking about how, like knowing that the tool is there and it's not going to go away, instead of kind of approaching it from like, don't use it. It's more, their approach was more like, okay, you can use it, and then you bring it in, and then we critique what has been generated to
Yeah,
see if you actually understand the content. And I thought that was a really interesting, I hadn't heard that perspective on how to use it in an academic setting, and it was an interesting idea.
it is. And I think it's just, I think we've reached the point where we have to figure out ways to work with it.
You have to embrace it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just
Yeah.
hard to use it for a final exam because you
it
have no
is.
way to bring it back in and discuss. But if
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
taught all semester,
Hmm.
yep.
Yeah.
I am tired of the hallucination citations. They just keep showing up.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating.
Mhm.
And they're obvious. The author is Jane or John Doe.
No.
All right, we are at noon. I'll admit more people as people come in, but let's get started just because we just have an hour. Hello, everyone. I'm Diana Miser. I work at Weber State in the Stewart Library. I'm the engineering librarian. Thank you for joining us. I have been dealing with some possible food poisoning, so sorry if I seem a little out of it. Just trying to survive today, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our panelists. I am going to let them give them a few minutes to all introduce themselves. So let's start with just what I have in alphabetical order. So Joella, like to start?
Yep, sure. Hi, everyone. I am Joella Bagshaw. I am the Children's Services Manager at the Provo City Library. And so I am in charge of all of the children's department, and I hire all of the children's librarians as well as our storytellers or storytime performers.
Thank you. And then we will go to Lindsey.
Hi, I'm Lindsey Dow. I work for SLCPL Salt Lake City Public Library. I'm the manager of the Sprague branch in Sugar House. I've been a manager for a little over 3 years.
Yes, as a group, this is our families.
And do participate in the hiring for the department.
Thank you. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Mendoza. I'm the branch manager of the Marmalade Branch Library in the Salt Lake City Public Library System. I've been a manager doing hiring decisions for about 13 years, and I'm responsible for all the hiring decisions at any location that I'm supervising.
Thank you, Erin. Paul had an emergency and wasn't able to join today. But we still have a lot of amazing people here. So Jamie, you are the final panelists.
The joy of Weeks. My name's Jamie Weeks, and I'm the university archivist at Weber State University. I'm also the co-head of Special Collections and University Archives, and I've been in administration positions for about 20 something years now. It's like 22 years that I've been in the hiring process for different areas of the library.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so today we're just we have some questions that I actually did use AI to help me come up with because I was drawing a blank. So it can be a tool. But I have some questions that I'm gonna ask the panelists for a little bit, and then we are gonna open it up to everyone else to ask questions. So the first question I'm going to ask the panelists, and I'll just let you kind of unmute as you want to share. What do you consider to be the most important factor when reviewing candidates for library positions?
So I'm going to jump on this one. I think the most important factor is, are they a good fit for the existing team? And what can they bring to the team that is maybe missing or that can fill a hole? But and you'll hear this throughout. I've learned that many things can be taught. It's super important that they fit.
I'll kind of piggyback off of that. I think, and there's like a question later about like technical skills versus personal and interpersonal skills, but I think that's really important, like thinking about your team and the dynamics. I also like there's different factors for different positions. So the more entry level positions have different factors of importance versus higher level positions. And then so for like a higher level position like librarian or above, looking at previous experience and education. And then for myself, I also come up with like my top 3 needs for the position that I'm really hoping to get filled. So it could be like someone who fits in well with the team, but it could be a number of any things, but what are the gaps that I'm seeing that I really need from this position?
I can go next. So I will say that the fit is very important. Like we have a really good group in the children's department right now that fits really well with each other. But in addition to that, I have to, because it's a children's department, I have to have people that work really well with kids. There have been a lot of people that have seemed like they would be a good fit, and I've even hired a couple, and then they were horrible with children, and that just doesn't work for where I'm at. And so they have to have a good fit, but they also have to have the skill set for the specific patrons that we have, which in my case is the children's department, and they have to have the specific skills for what we need. So like if I need a storytime performer, I need someone who can project their voice for the 150 kids that come to our toddler time and parents and whatnot. So you have, yeah, it's hard to say what the one thing is, but you have to have a good team and you have to have someone that actually can do the job for the people that you're hiring them to do the job for.
Yeah, I can pop in now. I completely agree with Joella. I think from the public library perspective, the vast majority of the positions that we're hiring, certainly the positions that Lindsey and I are hiring for, they're going to be public service facing. So really having a commitment to serving the community. And if it's a librarian or someone who's working in a particular service team, for example, like a children's services, teen services, something like that, being able to demonstrate both like a desire and an ability to to work with that community is really important. I think in terms of running a neighborhood branch, I am also looking for someone who has like a high level of flexibility and adaptability, kind of like personally, right? Our work is constantly changing, and in a neighborhood branch, like you're doing all the things all day long. So you need somebody who's able to kind of like roll with the punches. And then I think the last thing that I'm always looking for, well, obviously, other language skills other than English is hugely important in a public library setting, particularly Spanish language. So that's always something that I'm going to be looking for in cover letters and resumes. And it's surprising to me how many folks don't always call that out in a resume. They may mention something in a cover letter about being bilingual or having other language skills, but they haven't quite incorporated it into the resume as well. And then lastly, in an urban library setting, I think having some personal resilience to stress is hugely important. There's a lot of kind of unexpected things that happen in a public library setting that we kind of have to take control of a situation. And so any demonstration of resilience is really important for me.
Wonderful. Thank you all. The next question I have is, how do you ensure that your hiring practices are considered fair for all applicants?
I can go. I can do that. So I actually just finished interviewing people this morning, and one of the things I say when I'm interviewing is that we are asking the exact same questions to all of the candidates so that we can be as fair as possible, because that's one of the things that we do. I sent all my questions over to HR, and HR vets them and makes sure that they're appropriate and they're not things that I shouldn't be asking. And then I ask those exact same questions for that initial interview that I go with. And I'm also, when I'm trying to be fair, I like being transparent and just saying up front, okay, this is like, for example, this morning, when people walked in, I was like, thanks for coming. This is who I am. This is who's with me on the panel. I'm asking all the exact same questions, and I'm taking notes, and I'm telling you that I'm taking notes so that I can remember you and remember what you say. And there's a chance to ask questions at the end. And here's the process. And I just lay it all out for them. So it's all this transparent, what everything is. But I think the main thing is that I'm asking all the exact same questions to the same people, all the candidates, and I did get them vetted through HR. So
I can speak to that. Similarly, at the city library, we try to ensure that we are having consistent communication with all applicants. So making sure that we are like contacting in the same way, making sure that we actually send our interview questions 24 hours in advance for applicants to be able to review ahead of time. Part of that is, people just are able to prepare, if we want you to do well, why wouldn't we allow you to prepare a little bit? There's also an equity element in there of ensuring that if we're interviewing anyone who might have neurodivergence or anything else like cognitive difference, that we're giving them an equal shot, right? Sometimes people don't do great if it's just like a gotcha type situation. So we try to look at it from an equity lens. Lindsey and I both worked on a project where we got together with some other managers, and we actually put together banks of approved interview questions. So for every position, so our managers are able to just go find the interview questions for what position they're looking for, and they have a bank of questions that they can kind of cherry pick up to 9 questions. That's typically what the advice is for like how long an interview should be. You should be able to kind of grasp it within 9 questions. So yeah, that was a project that Lindsey and I worked on as well.
I really don't have anything to add because everything you've said is already in my notes. I think making sure that your questions don't put anybody in a negative light, that they don't promote one candidate above another. But that's taken care of with HR. And if you're not using HR, then you really need to be careful about what questions you're asking and ensuring that fairness across the board. But everything else is exactly what we do for jobs.
I don't have too much to add since Erin touched on a lot of it, but we use HR for a lot of the beginning process. They kind of go through all the applicants and do all of that scoring. So they're in charge of making sure they're following all of, everything like legally. And we also have links to, like, now we have the question pools, but before we had, there's websites that show like questions that are illegal to ask. So we're making sure we're not asking anything that would fall under that. And if we need to ask any questions that, or if a manager wants to ask a question that's not in the approved banks, then they have to submit it to HR within a certain amount of time to get approval. So yeah, we try very hard to make sure we're following, being consistent and following all of those policies.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, and for those that have joined us, we're just going to be going through some questions for the first 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to participants' questions. So the next question is, can you speak to how you assess a candidate's potential for growth and development within the library field?
I think one of the things that we do, and like they said, we provide the questions ahead of time. I think giving candidates the best opportunity to be the best of themselves. We provide some real life scenarios that actually take place. Because we work in an archival area, we're always like, there's always something you've never dealt with before, and that happens almost daily. So I like to see how a candidate can handle the unexpected. Is common sense, are their answers thoughtful? And does common sense float to the top? Because a lot of times that is what it's based on, is you have to think, okay, how would I handle this? And so just really giving them the opportunity to describe real life experiences, or how they would handle a real life experience that we've dealt with in the past.
I think those are really great things, having scenario type questions. Another thing, I think for me, there's like a balance. So if I'm filling a position, I'm also thinking about, I need to make sure I get someone who is qualified for the position. Those are my needs in the moment. Like, I need that position filled. But I think there are some things that you can glean from their resume, cover letter, and interview. If they have, past experience or past volunteer experience, like they're showing that they're interested in the job, hopefully means that they're interested in growing. But so yeah, it's kind of a balance, because I really need to make sure that like I have someone that is capable of filling the current job, and then hopefully we can do things to help them develop and grow.
Yeah, I agree with Lindsey. I'm always looking at what, depending on the position, obviously, what their previous positions were, and if those previous positions or volunteering or any of their experience that they're highlighting in their materials, if any of those things highlight working with the community, a desire for working in libraries, anything that overlaps within that. I'm also really open to looking at qualifications of people who have done other types of community service or community work. As a public librarian, that's really important, because that demonstrates that like you have a willingness to work with the public, and you're really invested in building up communities. Another thing that I will typically think about in the questions, and this is maybe like a little bit of a practical thing that I'm thinking about when I'm asking a question. I will very often notice, if I'm asking someone a question that is based on their experience, but then also maybe looking, how would you do something in the future? If they're not able to bridge that gap into what I would do or how I could react or something like that, that's always something that I hesitate about. A lot of times I'll interview someone and I'll ask a question about experience, and it's just a list of tasks that they used to have. And I would really love to hear more about how that experience actually helped equip you for future projects or situations that happen, instead of just like a list of basically just kind of like saying again what's on your resume. Right. And so that's something that I will notice when asking questions. If someone isn't really able to elaborate beyond like a list of tasks, that's something that will always like trigger further questions for me about their ability to kind of like think into the future and grow into a position and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just like Jamie said earlier, for me, a lot of the things that I look for in potential is when they do the situational questions. And I love it when like if they're trying to explain, they're not just sitting there thinking and being like, what would I do in that situation? But they might bring in, okay, so I had a similar type of thing that happened when I worked this other job, and this is how we handled it. So I probably would handle this in the future. And like I see a little bit of um they're navigating their thought process as to what their answer would be. And then one other thing I really like, our last question that we always have is, do you have any questions for us? And I love asking that question because I love when people will come and they have some very thoughtful questions about what the organization is like and how this would fit with their lives. And it really kind of shows like if people are interviewing us as much as we are interviewing other people. It's kind of nice because then I see the potential of, oh, okay, this is someone who is thinking hard about this position and working with us, and whether it's a good fit for us, and whether that will help them with their potential and what they want to have happen in the future. So I love seeing what the questions are when we ask what questions they have, because that kind of shows where they're thinking they can go potentially in the future.
And if they don't have any questions for us, that's a big red flag for me. I think if any of you, or I mean, if you're watching this to apply for jobs, that really is a big flag of if you haven't thought about it and you haven't come up with some questions for me, then you're not putting the same effort into this job that I am.
Great, thank you. I'm going to skip ahead a few questions because I generated a lot of questions and we're not going to get to all of them. So I'm going to pick my favorites. So how do you assess a candidate's ability to work collaboratively in a team environment, especially when working with other library staff or the community?
I'll jump in. So for this specifically, we do have questions that we ask about, tell us about a time you've worked on a team or a collaborative project, and what did you do to help make the project successful or the team successful, something along those lines. And again, if like anyone is interested in applying for jobs, or I think what I'm looking for is really specifics. Don't tell me about just the team and what the team did, but like I really want to know how you helped the team. How did you help the team be successful? And that will hopefully give me some insight into how you can be a great team member for my team. So that's one thing really specifically.
I think that's an excellent point, Lindsay. And also I give them scenarios like pop-up events, or so, and this has happened to us in the past year. The basement flooded and suddenly it was like all hands on deck. We all will be shifting and moving books. And are you a person that can jump in and help with the team on that? Or does that kind of scenario throw you and all of a sudden you're gone for a week? Those are things that I often see. And so that's something I'm really looking for, is somebody that can jump in and help last minute. That kind of thing doesn't throw them completely off, that every moment of their day can't be planned out in where I work because everything changes all the time in an archives. And so you have to be able to shift with the events.
I can go next. So just this morning in some of our storytime performer interviews, one of the things that I do is I ask them to read a book to us, because they're going to have to be reading books to children, right? And one thing I love watching for is if they can get me as the pretend audience person to have, like, if they ask me questions or if they try to draw me into the book and see how I can relate. So like, if someone's reading the book and they're like, oh, what animal do you see on this page? Or if they start asking questions, because then that shows me they're not just thinking about doing their task, but they're trying to see if what they're doing can bring other people in. And again, I love the scenario questions. I think those are super helpful. And sometimes I do, like, if I can't make up my mind for a candidate, especially storytime performers, because I have 2 storytime performers that have to work together. And I've had storytime performers that don't work together. And then I have to, like, I'm just stuck, because if you have 150 people coming to toddler time, you need 2 people in order to manage that many people. And so it's a little bit tricky, but sometimes I have done a second round of interviews where I've pulled candidates in and I make them do a task with a current employee, and I just watch how they respond. So it's, are you taking the lead? Are you collaborating together? Are you just following completely what somebody else says and won't even step up to the plate? And so depending upon what kind of position I have, I have a couple of tools for my toolbox to see how that they might work collaboratively.
I think the last thing that I would add, when thinking about if I'm asking questions specifically about collaboration or teamwork, I really love to hear how people describe those teams that they're using as their example. And a lot of times you can really get a sense of, like, if someone had a previous position where they did have a really effective team, you can see it on their face. You can see that they light up with joy about, like, whatever the dynamic of that team was and how they worked together, which is a really positive sign to me. That's not to say that there aren't times where, like, you have a really crummy team and it's really difficult to work with, but I also find those experiences to be really helpful in how people are able to talk about those situations, talk about overcoming things. But just listening to how people describe what those teams are, I think sometimes gives me an insight into how they see themselves as a collaborator.
Great, thank you. Okay. The next question is, how do you ensure the hiring process fosters a positive and productive team culture once staff is on board?
I can go. Onboarding, I think, and I know you have another question that uses that term, but I really think that's such an important part of success for a new candidate. And it depends on how broad their job description is and what it covers. I would never throw someone in to take on the whole job at once. So I'm really careful about picking maybe the 3 most vital things that they need to learn right off the bat. And once they've learned those, then moving on to the next thing. We also make sure that we provide a mentor within the department, that it's somebody that they really feel comfortable and safe with, that they can go to and go, Jamie's told me to do this, but I really don't get it. I like them to be able to have somebody to come to me, but also somebody else that they can say, I'm not understanding this. And so I think a mentor within the department is really important, and then making sure that you're not throwing too much at them at once, because you really want them to be successful. You've put so much money and time into this. It's really important.
Yeah, I can go again. So we do that as well, where we have specific training. I actually have an onboarding document for my department, and it will say day one objective is this. Week one objective is this. Week three objective, by the end of 3 weeks, you should know how to do this. And it's like a checklist. And I have all of my senior staff are assigned to help them with various training bits. So between myself and 3 other full-time librarians, we're all training, and that way they get to know each of the different people that are here full-time. And that way, like, it's really helpful to be like, oh, okay, so I could ask that person because I've been working with them and they've been training, and we're like bringing you into the children's department fold almost, to like, we're a team and all of us are doing stuff, and just giving them the objectives of this is what you should be able to learn, and here's step by step how you can get there, and we're just going to go through this step checklist of what it is, and okay, you got it, breathe, you're good, we're here. And then, okay, now that you've got this under your belt, we're going to give you this next thing. And it actually, our onboarding document goes for up to 3 months. So it's like by the end of 3 months, you should feel comfortable to be on my children's desk and to answer questions. And if you don't know the answer, you at least know where to look for the answer. But it's three months. I'm not telling them to have all of the answers by day one. And so that kind of helps. And everyone has like been through that training together. So we all are like, oh, you got this, type of a teamwork.
I can pop in. Similarly, the city library the last several months has been working on developing position-specific onboarding documents so that all managers are equipped with the same types of tasks that we're all onboarding our teams with to ensure that everybody is hitting those same targets and getting the same information when they need it. And we generally use that first 6 months of employment, which is that probationary period, in order to make sure that we're getting through all of the training and onboarding that staff need. Our people and culture department, there's a subdivision in there called, oh, now I'm blanking on it. Anyway, they've created all the staff training, equity and E&OD, organizational development. Sorry, couldn't think of the acronym right off the top of my head. But they've really done a lot of work to make sure that we've got system-wide trainings on things so that people are getting the same information, and that's something that they're working through in those first 6 months of their probationary period, to make sure that they're going through everything and hitting everything that they need to.
I don't have too much more to add, but it's been really helpful since we have been able to get those documents, which have had, like, for each of those positions, people in those positions have helped put them together. So we know that it is really hitting the things that, they needed to know or learn within those 6 months. So it's been really amazing. And then of course, there's different things for each department. So I have a list, I'm sure Erin has a list of like specific things for our locations that we make sure we go through with people, and like within certain time frames, they know all of the different specific nuanced things and pairing them with people. So yeah, hopefully we're setting everyone up for success. I also think this also made me think about if you have internal applicants that maybe don't receive the job, and you end up choosing someone externally or from another location or something like that, but really being conscientious about like how you do those regrets for the staff that you have in your own department or in the system, being consistent but also kind, and making sure that they receive like the attention or the feedback that they need maybe before the new person starts, that sort of thing, so that everyone feels like we're all a good team.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, this one's going to, this next question is going to touch on kind of recruitment and outreach. So what kind of outreach efforts do you use to reach maybe more passive candidates, or those not actively applying but could potentially be interested?
I can jump in here. I think for particularly thinking about our entry level positions, one of my most favorite programs that we have at the city library is called the Teen Squad, and it's actually a teen volunteer program that gives like pre-employment skills to teens. So they're not actually employed by the library, it's just volunteer, but they're given library projects to work on. They're paired with a teen librarian that helps coach them through things. And I know from personal experience, years ago, I had a teen squad volunteer at a location that I was supervising. And now that teen volunteer is one of our associate librarians at the main library downtown. So I feel like that's a really good success story. So if any of you know Julissa, woohoo. Anyway, so I think that's like a really great way of growing people into a desire for work in libraries, is if you can even capture those kids that are already kind of a captive audience in our spaces, and then we can really kind of like grow from the bottom up that love of libraries for, their whole life.
We do, because of the setting we're in, we do outreach, and so we'll outreach at like a job fair on campus. I always go to, we have a specific job fair for just history students, and we get a lot of interns from that then do a great job for us for 6 months and then decide that, maybe this is something they want to go into, when really they were just, because we do paid internships, they were just looking, because they're students, a paid internship. And so I always make sure that I promote, internships especially for our history students, um, because they're the ones that would be most interested in what we're doing.
We do a lot of so like we have a lot of volunteers that potentially grow, like Erin was talking about, and we also have a library email that goes out to all of the people in our library that we have emails for. And we're kind of in Provo known for our library emails because the person who writes them is just incredibly funny and delightful. And so every now and then, like when I had my job that just closed recently, she sent out a help wanted type of a thing, or do you love the library? Do you want to work here? Do you know someone who wants to work at the library? And we actually, so this last job that I had like a small number of candidates, less than 10, and that email went out, and all of a sudden it tripled how many more came in afterwards. So we have just people that love our library, that listen to or read our newsletter, will share it with other people. And so we have lots of, oh, you would be great at this job because I know what this is like, and I see this position, and I go to the library, and you would be good. Why don't you apply for that? And it kind of word of mouth spreads that way. So we have a lot of volunteers that have gone through and gotten jobs that I've hired before, as well as just our emails work really well here. So
I don't have too much more to add. I will say, like, Erin and I don't post jobs. That's handled by HR, and I know they post to various platforms. I believe they use, Handshake, which posts jobs to colleges in the area. So that's helpful for, like a few folks have said, like reaching people that may not have thought about the library. But yeah.
Great. I really want to get on your email list now. It sounds amazing. I love reading fun emails. Okay, we'll do one last question and then we will open it up to participant questions. But what are some common challenges you face when you're hiring for library positions, and how do you overcome those?
okay, so one thing that happens a lot, sorry, I just feel like I'm talking a lot, but we have a storytime performer is in my head because that's what I'm interviewing for today. I'm actually going to go do more interviews after this panel is over, so sandwiched in between this. But one of the things that they often do is they think it's a summer job, or they think it's a temp job, or they think they can move the times around. So like our story times are always at 10 and 11 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And they're like, oh yeah, I can do that job, but actually, can we just have story times at 2 o'clock now? And it's like, that doesn't work for the library. It's been at these times for decades. And that's when we have story time. It's when it's developmentally appropriate for a lot of kids, nap times that families can come. Anyway, that's one of my issues that I have a lot is people are just assuming that they can rearrange the schedule, or that they, for my children's librarian positions, they just assume they'll never have to work nights and weekends, but we're a public library and we're open on nights and weekends, and not every job in a public library can only just be from 9 to 5 or whatnot. Anyway, so one of the things that we do to combat that is, one of the questions that we have is, these are the hours for the job. Are you available to do that? And we actually, when we call to schedule the interviews, like for the Storytime performers, we called and we said, okay, so I'm calling to offer an interview for this particular position, which these are the hours, and this is not a temporary position. So it's not just a summer job. This is a position that will last all through the fall. And are you still interested in having an interview? And that kind of has actually, there were 2 different people this last round that were like, oh, it's not just summer and I can't just pick which days of the week I'm going to work. So like it said in the job description, it was Monday through Friday in the mornings, but I was hoping I could just do Monday, Wednesday, Friday and not have Tuesday, Thursday. And we're like, no, we actually need these hours. Oh, well, never mind then. And so it's been really helpful to just like state up front, this is what the job is. These are the hours. Are you still interested in applying? Because then it doesn't waste their time and it doesn't waste my time. And they know that the expectation is that this isn't just a summer job, or yes, I am going to have to work some sort of nights or weekends because libraries are open nights and weekends, because that's what we need to be. So anyway, that it's just been helpful to be a little transparent about some of the issues that I've had ahead of time.
I'm just going to say, pressure to hire from within. That is one thing that, and we all deal with it, and sometimes it's unspoken, sometimes it's under the table spoken, and sometimes working in a full team, I've just dealt with it like over the years so many times, and luckily there's that 6-month grace period where if it doesn't work out, then someone can go back to the position they had before. But um, I, I don't always see success from the hires within. Um, and so that pressure to do that is usually, I don't know, at least half the time not successful for the candidate. And I feel bad about that, but it's fact.
I can chime in here. I would like to agree with both of you about the comments that you had. I think scheduling is always like, I'm a branch manager. That's like the bane of my existence. And like 98% of my job sometimes is just figuring out dynamic schedules of, 17 people and making sure that we have adequate coverage for all the hours that we have. And for a lot of our library aide and assistant positions, those positions are typically folks who are in school. So we want to honor school schedules and things like that, but it makes scheduling really difficult. And yeah, some of those changing expectations of like, well, yeah, I committed to this schedule, but now I need something different. Why can't you work with me on it? That's really tough. And I agree with you, Jamie. Sometimes there is an expectation that longevity should be the reason why somebody is able to advance in a position. And there are times where that aligns with the department and the position and the qualifications that they bring on board. And sometimes it doesn't. And it's really uncomfortable in the moments when it doesn't. And of course, the applicant feels bad and they see it a different way. And sometimes it's hard to make those make those difficult decisions. I would say one of the other common challenges that I'm facing as a public librarian managing a branch, and I'm just going to throw it out there, is that difference in qualifications and expectations of qualifications. There's a lot of talk in library land about whether or not having an MLS or an MLIS is what is necessary in order to do the job these days. And in a public library setting, we have positions where it's well suited, and we have other positions where it's not necessary. And we're in times where, higher education is profoundly expensive, and that's a huge barrier for people. And there are other skill sets available that people get through different types of experience that can transfer into working in a library. Or in a public library, I should say. And so kind of navigating all of those different priorities is incredibly difficult. And then, of course, we have just like the pool of candidates that arrive that may not even meet any of those standards, right? Sometimes we have excellent recruitment pools, and other times it's a little bit disconcerting when you look at the candidates and you're like, wow, this really isn't as robust with the skills and qualifications that I was looking for. Is this really going to be the right fit for my department at this time? And then, of course, if you are serving a community and you're managing a location that has set open hours, you also have the urgency of like needing to get the coverage. Do I have time to do a second recruitment because I don't have the pool of candidates that really show off what we need? Do I have the capacity to stretch this to another 6 weeks, or do I need somebody right now? And that's when we go back to earlier, we acknowledged like the confluence of like there are teachable skills and there are unteachable skills. And so being able to navigate, like, if I'm interviewing a pool of candidates and okay, so maybe they don't have the educational qualifications that I would prefer for this position. Has this person demonstrated that they have the people skills to be able to navigate an urban library setting? If they are able to do that, I will often be like, okay, these are the teachable skills of how to do the job. And so balancing a lot of those things, and that's just a lot to be thinking about when you're going through a recruitment process, and it can be really stressful for sure.
I think I'll just add on a little piece of that of, a lot of, I think there's a lot of candidates for a public urban library that maybe don't realize, if they haven't even stepped foot in one of them themselves, they don't know what the job might be like. So folks that identify wanting to work somewhere quiet, wanting to work somewhere where they think they can read. So there's that difference, and like hopefully our job postings show that this is an urban library setting, but I don't know if everyone recognizes that, reads all of the details in a job posting, that sort of thing. So that's always a challenge, is hoping that all of your candidates really recognize what type of a job this is for a public library.
Great, thank you all so much. So I am going to open it up to the participants if they want to ask any questions of our panelists. Just let anyone ask either in chat or you can unmute. If not, I can ask the panelists to share a funny story. Maybe the weirdest thing that's ever happened in an interview.
I have
Oh, yes,
question.
Erin.
What would be your best recommendation for developing the skills that you want to see and that libraries are needing when you are when they're looking for experience and you're not in a position to gain that experience through unemployment or underemployment? Yeah.
I think hopefully I can give you some answer, and maybe someone can build off of what I'm going to say. But I think If there's ways that you can connect anything that you have from your past. So like if you have had any type of customer service job, if you worked, like maybe you had a job in a grocery store or something like that, like you are helping people. And so connecting experience like that, and I'm sure speaking from a public library perspective, but that is a lot of the job, is helping people, being able to, kindly help them. So if you can connect anything that you have from your past experience or past jobs, like that is really helpful. So maybe it's not library experience, maybe you haven't gone to library school, maybe, but being able to connect, experience that you have to what you might experience as a day-to-day, helping people, navigating different, questions and problems that people come to the library for. So maybe someone else can build off of a little bit of that, but that's what's coming to my mind right away.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lindsay. And I think, we also live in an area where there are a lot of folks that do a lot of volunteering. And so if there's any sort of like volunteer experience one has in their background that has any sort of like community service bent, that's always that's experience, even if it's not paid experience, any sort of demonstration of a commitment to the community. Um, is awesome. And even if you are in a position where you're unemployed or underemployed, haven't had those kinds of opportunities, you also are a member of a community, and any applicant can, I guess, if prompted or if they're thinking about it, think about a time when they were either positively impacted or negatively impacted as a member of a community, and thinking about what the dynamics were, how that felt as that person, and what being able to articulate how one would carry forward their own like personal philosophy of service to their community. That's kind of how I would think about it.
We also list, we may list skills or requirements, but also remember that there's always the option of something equal to it. Like, maybe it's required that there's an associate's degree, or something equal to it could be 4 years of working um, in the field, or does that, I hope that makes sense. There are different things that even technical skills, if you don't do that specific skill that is being asked for, what do you do that could be equal to? And use that to build on.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. And the volunteer thing is where I go to first, that volunteer option, because if people are like, I don't have all these skills, I've often said, well, if you come and volunteer, you can see what the skills are, and then they can start figuring out what other experience they've had in their background that they can do the skills. And I see Jen's question in the chat about if people come in to help with a story time as an example, and find this hard sometimes to ask of them since they have to plan and arrange their schedule to do it, and then I might not hire them. How do you feel about asking them for this extra time? And that's hard, but if people want like the story time position and they want to come in and help with story time, I've had people do that and they've rearranged their schedule. I still, as the manager, like my job is to hire the best candidate for the position. So I do want to like give people opportunities to see through volunteering what those skills are, but I still have to do that. And it's tricky because I do feel bad sometimes when they're not the best candidate for the job, but also they can find through volunteering and still participating in our story time, they can learn the skills potentially to what is the best, what other skills do I need? And I don't know, this is just such the hard part about being a manager, right? Is that you just, I don't know. Me personally, I can tell you a personal experience. Like when I got this job 10 years ago, I wasn't a manager, and that is a tricky one to jump into because how do you get managing skills if you're not a manager, right? So one of the things I did, I worked at Salt Lake County Library for 2 years, and before that, I was up in Washington State, and I just kept volunteering to be on all of the committees that did different things. So, like in Salt Lake County, I was on a committee to help train everybody how to use Polaris instead of Horizon when we switched over. And so then when I was in my manager, my interview for this position with this manager job, I was like, hey, yeah, I'm not a manager, but I know how to train people to do this thing. So it was like, it is that finding what skills you have that would work for the kind of like what Jamie was saying, you don't have this experience, but you have the qualifying thing that kind of works with it. But also, Jen, I have had that happen where I've had a person come to help volunteer with story time and then I didn't pick them and I feel like a jerk. But I also know that I have to pick the best candidate of who applies for the job. And that's who I picked. Okay, there you go.
Anyone else have another question?
I just want to acknowledge Jen's last comment that they feel connected and think you will hire them. That is the struggle with internal candidates in any situation, right? Lindsey and I do a lot of this and we get a lot of internal candidates, and it is really tricky when you have an internal candidate that you know is invested in the organization, they're invested in the community, and for whatever reason, they're just not the right fit. That's always the hardest. This is the hardest call to make. But it's also those moments when you have to really be holding your feet to the fire to ensure that you are following all of your procedures 100%, that you're checking your personal biases, that you're, making sure that equity is at the forefront of everything that you're doing, to make sure that you're really giving a fair shot to all of your internal candidates as well as the external candidates.
And I have another thing to add about internal candidates. If it's somebody that's an internal, like if you're the internal candidate, pretend like you don't know who you're interviewing with, because sometimes I've had people who in their interview, they don't seem like, I mean, I know them, but they in their interview with their questions and what I'm supposed to be judging them on based everyone else, like they're like, oh yeah, I've worked with kids. But then they don't, like, they assume that I know all of the things, which I may know all of the things, but as an internal candidate, you often have to like oversell yourself and make sure that you're telling all of the things, even if you know that that person that you're interviewing with knows those things. You have to still like sell yourself as a candidate, because I think sometimes they assume that we're going to hire them and then they don't put in the effort in the interview, and then all of a sudden it's like this which is a different problem than the one of if they really aren't the best candidate. Sometimes you're like, well, they could be the best candidate, but they didn't actually put in the work for the interview as well. Oh gosh, it's hard.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is like the most helpful feedback for, I don't know if the majority of folks watching right now or that will listen are people hoping to apply or move up. But I will just say, like, from a manager's perspective, like, this is like the crux of my job. I really have to make sure I'm following everything correctly, as Erin pointed out, but making those calls and then doing my due diligence to let internal candidates or maybe our volunteer, whatever, it's really up to me to help them understand like why there may have been another candidate chosen, if they're willing to hear that feedback, and also really think of things that I can do. I'm thinking mostly about an internal candidate, but thinking of things that I can do to help them so that they can improve or, offer feedback. I feel like that is part of my role in hiring, is thinking of how I can help those folks that I may know or that might reach out and offer some concrete feedback.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Does anyone have any final quick questions? I do really want to thank the panelists for sharing their expertise and participating. I also want to thank Carla, my co-chair on the continuing ed committee, because she's kept me in line. And any final questions? Any final things the panelists want to share?
I just want to we just shout out to all the people that help with hiring at Salt Lake City Public Library and all the work that has been put in. And it's not just me and it's not just Erin. And so just want to say that it's a great team. And
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank all of you for coming and participating today. It was a great conversation. And yeah, thanks so much to ULA. I used to be a co-chair for Continuing Education Committee a million years ago. So I'm glad you guys are still doing good work.
Well, thank you all so much and have a wonderful day and rest of your week. Friday's tomorrow. Thank you.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.